YouTube, what's going on, y'all? It's Pick Saber here, and welcome to another video. Really quickly, before I get into today's video topic, I want to remind you if you're new here, go check out my introductory video where I go into detail about what type of content to expect on the channel. So every year in college football, we see teams who fall short of expectations, or teams who just simply take a step back from what they accomplished the year prior. And sometimes we get the most shocking result, which is when the bottom falls out and teams just completely implode. We've seen several examples of this in 2025, including Texas, Penn State, Clemson, and LSU. All of those teams were coming off a year in which they made the CFP, with the exception of LSU, who didn't make the college football playoff in 2024, but did have lots of expectations to do so coming into 2025. Clemson came into the year as the favorite to not only win the ACC, but represent them in the CFP. Penn State had just made the CFP semifinal the year before. All these teams were expected to do well in some capacity and began the year ranked inside the top 10, just to find themselves outside of the playoff picture by season's end. In some cases, like Penn State or LSU, coaches were fired. And while Texas didn't necessarily have a terrible 2025, they did begin the season ranked number 1 with very high expectations just to end up playing Michigan in the Cheez-It Bowl. Another recent example would be 2024 Florida State, who came into the season ranked inside the top 10, coming off a year in which they won the ACC and finished 13-1, just to finish with a 2-10 record the following year. Although these results can be shocking to many college football fans, sometimes there are signs that point to what will inevitably come to be. Many people choose to ignore these signs, or they're just simply blinded and don't see the reality of the truth. As a college football bettor, it's very important to try to have foresight and notice these signs when they appear. And you must treat these teams like a stock in the stock market by looking for opportunities to buy low and sell high. So today we'll discuss a team that I think has a solid chance of taking a step back in 2026. Now, obviously, when looking for a team to sell high on, you need to go look at the top and find a team whose stock is at an all-time high, meaning they're coming off a season in which they exceeded expectations and won a lot of games. And when I take a look at the final top 25 poll, one team really stands out to me. Now, some people would naturally point to Ole Miss, who finished 13-2, and will no longer have Lane Kiffin or Charlie Watts Jr. on the sideline calling offensive plays. But in this specific instance, we're looking for a team whose stock is at an all-time high. And due to Lane Kiffin leaving for LSU, Ole Miss stock really took a hit. But there is another SEC team whose stock is at an all-time high, and that's none other than Texas A&M. While the Aggies did have a successful 2025, finishing 11-2, there's an asterisk behind their success, as they really benefited from playing a weak SEC schedule. A&M only played one SEC team with a winning conference record, feasting on the bottom half of the SEC. And when they did finally run into an SEC team with a winning conference record, they inevitably lost the game. And then the season would start to rear its ugly head, as they would proceed to lose a home playoff game in which they only put up 3 points. These are signs pointing down, especially when you consider the fact that Texas A&M also almost lost to South Carolina. And let me be clear, Texas A&M is not the only team that you can poke holes at. As I said before, some people will point to Ole Miss and their coaching staff turnover, or some may even point to Alabama, who lost to a bad Florida State team and couldn't run the ball consistently. But my pushback would be, although those are fair assessments of both Ole Miss and Alabama, it doesn't necessarily present the opportunity to sell high, as Ole Miss is currently priced at minus 250 to miss the CFP. And in the case of Alabama, they will begin the year not ranked in the top 10 for the first time since 2008, which would mean that Bama's stock is really at an all-time low. But let's dive deeper into Texas A&M so I can break down why I think they'll take a step back. Now, as already mentioned, Texas A&M benefited from a weak conference schedule, and when they finally ran into real competition in Texas and Miami, they fell flat on their face. In the game against Texas, Aggies quarterback Marcel Reed was not efficient or effective in leading the offense down the stretch of the game, causing the offense to struggle to sustain drives as Texas scored 17 unanswered points in the third quarter, and his execution completely faltered in the fourth quarter with two critical interceptions, including a crushing turnover inside the Texas 5-yard line that dashed any hopes of a comeback. Around 3 weeks later, with an ample amount of time to prepare for their opponent, Texas A&M lost the home playoff game to Miami. Despite outgaining Miami in total yards and holding the ball for nearly 34 minutes, the Aggies couldn't punch the ball into the end zone all afternoon, as their only points came from a lone field goal. Miami's pass rush completely overwhelmed A&M's front, sacking Marcel Reed 7 times. The Aggies repeatedly shot themselves in the foot. Marcel Reed threw two costly interceptions, including a game-sealing pick in the end zone in the final seconds as A&M tried to drive for a tying score. Reed also lost a fumble during the game, turning promising drives into empty possessions. While the Texas A&M defense did hold Carson Beck and the Hurricane offense mostly in check, the offense's inability to finish drives turned their playoff debut into a bitterly disappointing home loss. Now we fast forward to this year, and I have some doubts about this Texas A&M football team. Offensive coordinator Colin Klein left the program in December to become the head coach at Kansas State, and defensive coordinator Jay Bateman left College Station to accept the defensive coordinator position at Kentucky. The upcoming schedule for 2026 does Mike Elko no favors. The Aggies have to hit the road for some of the toughest places to play in the SEC, including games against LSU in Death Valley, Alabama at Bryant-Denny, on the road at Missouri, South Carolina at Williams-Brice, and Oklahoma at Norman, with the late November showdown against Texas back at College Station. The path to navigating the schedule unscathed leaves very little room for error. So in other words, A&M won't have the luxury of playing a weak SEC schedule this year. The Aggies also went real heavy into the transfer portal to completely rebuild their trenches, replacing 4 starters along the offensive line. And while some of these acquisitions sound good on paper, if this unit doesn't gel immediately, the entire offense could stall against elite SEC front sevens. Also, as demonstrated last year, when Marcel Reed is in pressure situations, he tends to fold. And so with all these things being considered, I'm selling my stock in Texas A&M. But instead of playing the under on their regular season win total, which I think is fairly priced in the market at 8.5 wins, I bet them to miss the CFP at -160, as I make the fair number -210. So if you enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel, as I will be bringing more informational college football content just like this leading up into the regular season. But until then, I'll see y'all when I see y'all. Pick Saban, clocking out.